Hi everyone, I'm Nick Olivo, and today we're going to look at how to create Roll20 macros for your Circle of Wildfire Druid, no API required. Before we dive in, I'd just like to thank Roll20 for sponsoring this video. Circle of Wildfire Druids come to us from Tasha's Cauldron of Everything, and the idea behind a Wildfire Druid is they can expend one use of their Wild Shape ability to summon in a small fire elemental called a Wildfire Spirit. The druid gets a bond with this spirit, and it fuels some special powers for the druid. So what we're going to do today is build macros to help facilitate those powers, and while I won't use the API as part of today's video, I will mention a few places where the API might be helpful. But without further ado, let's dive in and start building some macros. So the first macro that we're going to build has to do with actually summoning in the Wildfire Spirit. And as you can see in this paragraph, the Wildfire Spirit appears in an unoccupied space of our choice within 30 feet, and each creature within 10 feet of the spirit other than you must make a dex save or take 2d6 fire damage. So when all is said and done, the macro output is going to look like this, where we have the dex save being put into the chat, along with the amount of damage being dealt in a 10-foot radius. So let's see how we build this. So here's the finished code for the macro. Let's go through each piece of it so we can see how it works. And template damage. So this is the template type that we're going to be using for this macro. It's going to output in this format over here. There's no attack roll associated with it. It just is going to show damage being dealt. Our name equals summon Aggie. That's what shows up right here. And what I'm saying is we're summoning in Aggie, which is the name of my Wildfire Spirit. I just love that name. All right, so Aggie is summoned in. Range 10 feet. That's the radius of the damage that we're dealing. And that's displayed right above summon Aggie over here. And then damage equals 1 and damage 1 flag equals 1. What these two things are saying is that we are going to actually display the damage in the chat. Without these values being set, there would be no damage roll shown. So we're going to set both of those. And then damage 1 equals bracket 2d6. So that's the inline roll that we're making, saying that we're rolling 2d6 for the amount of damage being dealt. And if we hover over the 5 here, we can see that we rolled 2d6. I rolled a 4 and a 1. The damage 1 type is showing fire, which is right below the damage roll here. And then save equals 1 means that we're going to display the saving throw box that you see at the top of the output. And then the save attribute is going to be dexterity, so that's the type of save that it is. And then the save DC is listed as Allrush Pipe Spell Save DC. So we're looking at my Druid's character sheet, his name is Allrush, and I'm looking at the Spell Save DC attribute on my character sheet in order to show that DC 15. And then finally, char name equals Allrush. That's going to show up at the very bottom of the output here, just so that my DM knows exactly what character this damage is coming from. So now what we can do is press Ctrl A on the keyboard to select everything, then Ctrl C to copy it all. And now let's go into our Druid's character sheet. I'm going to make sure I'm on the Attributes and Abilities tab, and we're going to create a new ability, and we're going to call that ability Summon Aggie. And then I'm just going to paste in the code. We'll save that, make it a token action. And now when we click on our Druid, we've got Summon Aggie listed over here in the toolbar. We can just click that. And there we go. There's our macro, summoning Aggie in and letting our DM know that everybody in a 10-foot radius needs to make a DC 15 dex save or take 7 fire damage. Now, some of you may be wondering if it's possible to automatically put Aggie's token on the board as part of this summoning macro. And the answer to that is yes, if you have access to the API. There's a script called spawn default token that you can use for this purpose. I've done a video about it before, and I'll put a link down in the description. What we want to do next is build out some macros for the attacks that our Wildfire Spirit has, specifically their Flame Seed and Fiery Teleportation abilities. So let's see how those work. So back in my game, I've got my Wildfire Spirit's character sheet open, and let's look at their Flame Seed ability to start with. This is their Spitfire, essentially. So we click that, and if we roll damage, we see that it comes up as 5 for 1d6, plus PB, and that PB is my Druid's proficiency bonus. Now, if we try to edit this, and I put in on hit 1d6 plus my Druid's proficiency bonus, Unfortunately, it doesn't actually take. So what we're going to do is build a macro that correctly calculates this damage. The output of that macro is going to look like this, where we've got 2 attack rolls being made with the range specified and the damage being rolled correctly. So let's take a look at the code for this. So here's the code, and the way this starts out is template is attack damage. That means we're making attack rolls and calculating damage all in the same output. Mod equals Alrush's spell attack bonus. So I'm reading that right off of Alrush's character sheet. That's the 7 that you see over here on the right. Our name equals Flame Seed, so that's the name of our ability showing up right here. R1 is the roll on the left. That's a D20 plus my spell attack bonus. Always equals 1 means that we're rolling twice for advantage and disadvantage purposes. R2 is exactly the same as R1. It's a D20 plus our spell attack bonus. Attack equals 1 means we're actually displaying the attack rolls. We've got a range of 60 feet, which you see right here. The damage and damage 1 flags, these are exactly the same as what we saw earlier. Those mean that we're actually displaying the damage. And then the damage is 1d6 plus Alrush's proficiency bonus. So we're reading that right off of his character sheet. And then our damage 1 type is fire, and our crit is going to be 1d6. And the description is a pulse of fire, which shows up right here. So now what I can do is select all this, copy it, and then go into my Wildfire Spirit's character sheet. We'll go to Attributes and Abilities. I'm going to add a new ability, and I'm going to call this ability Flame Seed. And then I'm just going to paste in my code, and we'll save that. We'll make it a token action. And now when we click on our Wildfire Spirit's token, there we go. We've got our Flame Seed with our attack roll, D20 plus 7, which is my spell attack bonus. So that's being calculated correctly. And then my damage is a D6 plus my Druid's proficiency bonus, which is a 3. So I rolled 4 damage here. So that's all working correctly. Next up, we're going to make a macro for the Fiery Teleportation ability here, where the spirit and each willing creature of your choice within 5 feet of it teleport up to 15 feet to unoccupied space, as you can see, and each creature within 5 feet of the space that the spirit left has to succeed on a dexterity save or take 1d6 plus proficiency bonus fire damage. The code for this macro is going to look really similar to what we did earlier when we summoned Aggie onto the battlefield. So in the interest of time, I'm just going to call out a couple of places where the code between those two macros are different. So I've just run the code, the output's over on the right, and of course the main difference between the two is the name is Fiery Teleportation. We're only dealing 1d6 plus our proficiency bonus for damage, and then the description flag is being displayed here just as a reminder that you can teleport up to 15 feet to an unoccupied space that you can see. So once we've got this, we can again copy it all. We'll go into our Wildfire Spirit's Attributes and Abilities page, add a new ability, we'll call it Fiery Teleportation, paste that in, save it, make it a token action, and just like before now, we can click Fiery Teleportation, and there we go, we've got that displayed properly. So now what we can do is start making macros for our next Druid ability, which is called Enhanced Bond. Enhanced Bond says that anytime you cast a spell that heals or deals fire damage, you get to add an additional D8 to whatever you rolled as long as your Wildfire Spirit is on the battlefield. Now, there are a couple of ways that we could approach this. The way that I decided to handle things is I'm going to create special copies of my macros that have that additional damage or healing, and I'm going to put those right onto my Wildfire Spirit's character sheet. That way, the only way I can use them is when the Wildfire Spirit is actually on the board. So let's see how we set those up. So back in my game, let's start out by setting up an Enhanced Cure Wounds spell. So I'm going to open up my Druid's character sheet here, and I'm going to scroll down until I get to the Attacks and Spellcasting section, and I'm going to run Cure Wounds from here. And it's important you run it from here rather than the Spells tab. We're going to see why in just a minute, but I'm just going to click that, cast at level 1, and over on the right we can see, all right, there's our output. We rolled a d8 plus our Wisdom modifier for healing. Okay, cool. Well, now what I'm going to do is come down to the chat box here, and I'm going to press up on my keyboard. And when I do that, you'll see a bunch of stuff shows up here. I'm going to copy all of that, and I'm going to paste that into my trusty notepad window here. And what you're looking at here is all the code that gets used as a result of clicking Cure Wounds from the Attacks and Spellcasting section of your character sheet. If we'd run the spell from the Spells tab, then the code that would come out of that would look really different and isn't in a format that we can modify for the enhancement purposes. Now there's a whole bunch of stuff going on here, but really all we need to do is make a couple of small tweaks. The first is going to be to the name. We're going to call this Enhanced Cure Wounds. And then here in damage 1, we're going to add in another D8, and we're going to put the word enhanced inside of square brackets after that D8. And then the last thing I'm going to do is change this +4 whiz right here. I'm going to make that plus Ulrush's wisdom modifier. And now when we run this, I'm just going to copy all this. I'm going to clear out this section down here, paste that in. Again, we'll cast at level 1. And you can see now when I hover over this, we have a D8 plus another D8 for our enhanced plus our wisdom modifier. So we actually just got 10 healing back. So now what we can do is go back into our Wildfire Spirits character sheet. We'll go to the attributes and abilities section again. We're going to add a new ability called Enhanced Cure Wounds. Paste that in, save it, make it a token action. And there we go. We'll say let's cast this at level 2. All right, we got a higher level cast where we rolled an additional D8. And then we also had our D8 plus our enhanced plus our wisdom. So this is working properly. Now, obviously, I can't cover every possible healing spell in this video, but you can use that same approach we just did for things like Healing Word or Mass Cure Wounds or whatever. I will throw one more macro out here for fire damage right now, though, because my druid likes to cast Flame Blade, so let's see how we'd set that up. So here's my Flame Blade macro. It's, again, using that attack damage template. And again, a lot of the things in here are going to look very similar to what you saw with some of the macros I created earlier. But again, I'm going to do the same type of thing we just did for the healing spell. I'm going to call this Enhanced Flame Blade. And I'm going to add in that D8 for the enhancement. I'm going to put that both in my regular damage and in my crit. And then I can copy all this. I can put it onto my Wildfire Spirits character sheet, just like we did before. We'll call this Enhanced Flame Blade. Paste in the code. Again, make it a token action. And now, when I want to use that, it's right there. So next up on our Wildfire Druid ability list is this feature called Cauterizing Flames. And what this does is anytime a small or larger creature dies within 30 feet of your druid or your wildfire spirit, a harmless spectral flame comes forth and remains in that spot for 1 minute. And if another creature moves through that spectral flame, you can choose to heal them or deal damage to them. So let's see how we can set that up. So the way I chose to set this up was to create another character sheet called Cauterizing Flames and give my druid control of that character sheet. And now, let's say that this Twig Blight has died, my druid can just drag this Cauterizing Flames right on top of them, and then you can see here when I click on it, it already has a couple of macros queued up, one for healing, and one for burning. And wow, I just made a couple of really good rolls there. And so if I alt double click this character sheet open, you're going to see it's totally blank. The only thing it has on it are these attributes and abilities for the flames and the healing. And to make this easier to read, again, we're using the damage template here called Cauterizing Flames or Cauterizing Healing, depending on what we're doing. And then the damage is 2d10 plus my druid's wisdom modifier. Now, some people may look at this code and say, hey, Nick, couldn't you have a query that would allow the user to select whether they wanted to burn or heal the target? And the answer to that is yes, absolutely you could. But my personal preference is to have a dedicated button for each option, and so that's why I've set it up like this. So the final Wildfire Druid ability is called Blazing Revival. Essentially, if you drop to 0 HP, you can choose to have your Wildfire Spirit drop to 0 HP instead, and you regain half your hit points. Unfortunately, there isn't a way to make a macro for this one without using the API. If you do have access to the API, the script you want to use is called chat_set_atra. And I've done a video on that before. I'll include a link to it down in the description below. So for this one, if you don't have the API, you just have to remember how it works and do the math by hand. One final thing before we close out, that bonfire icon that I used for the Cauterizing Flames came from this Fire Spells pack by Moonlight Maps. This is available on the Roll20 marketplace. They have some really gorgeous stuff in here, so I just wanted to call that out and say thank you to Moonlight Maps for making these awesome icons. So there you have it. That's how we can make some macros for your Wildfire Druid in Roll20. I hope you found this video helpful. If you did, please give it a like and consider subscribing. And until next time, folks, Have a great day.